Let's jump right in. My name is Oren. This is Alina. And today we're talking about Fireproof. I'm really talking about marriage and showing the answer to a question on why married couples hate each other, as well as, I believe, a good solution to resolving the hatred that sometimes a spouse or spouses have towards each other.
Married people fight a lot, that they hate each other. It seems to be a running joke among single people that married people that, you all fight like an old married couple. Like, that's just the joke.
I think is that married couples potentially could hate each other because of unmet expectations. In the very beginning of the movie, the little girl talks about, or there's a little girl voice. We tried to turn on the captions, but it was hard to see or hear what she was saying. But she wanted to marry her daddy, and it was all cute and stuff. And the mom was like, "Oh, you can't marry the daddy. He's mine." And it was like 35, or not 35. It was like 20 years ago or something. It was like 20 years ago, and then the girl's all happy and stuff. And then flashes forward, and she's married to this firefighter. Obviously, this woman went into a marriage having an expectation of a prince, knight in shining armor. And in all respects, he is, because he's a firefighter. He does save people. But there are times when she's like, why doesn't he see me? I feel like I'm alone here. I feel like I'm being left behind, basically. And why doesn't he look at me the way he looks at other people? Because he did have the pornography issue as well. And not that I was on the side where I'm finding out, but how does that feel?
I think it was accurate. I think that she, felt like she wasn't important. I think a lot of women, at least for me, want to know that, hey, I am number one, and not out of just selfishness, but that someone who actually really cares about me, and not just says it, but actually does things to show it. So I thought it was a little unrealistic that they did not have any children in 7 years. Maybe it was intentional, but I feel like that possibly made things a lot easier. I know, like, with marital issues, and they brought up a bunch of issues, like, in the short time of the film, kind of these emotional affairs / infidelity, pornography, like just working and all that stuff. And
yeah.
But what was missing was the children, the stress of children. Like, I was a little jealous. It's like, well, of course you have time to talk and resolve these issues and think about things if, children. That, and then it seemed like money was not talked about as well. Like, I feel like those are the two top stressors in most any marriage is, money issues and children.
And it's hard to see because we did have children, like, within year 4 of our marriage or something like that,
Year 2, yeah.
Yeah, like year 2, year 3-ish. It was early on. So it's hard to picture someone, a couple without kids that far along. In the very beginning, she does bring up, like, the wife brings up, I forget her name, I don't know. But she does bring up why she's working at that hospital. Like, because Kirk Cameron's character is like, hey, well, if you actually stayed home and cooked or something like that, like, he made some little remark, and then she's like, well, we have to do this 2 people working thing because you don't make enough money for us to have this house. And to be real, the house was nice.
Yeah.
And we know fireman's salary, even if he was supposed to be a chief or captain or whatever, he probably not making enough to handle that house, because that house kept getting better and better every time we saw a scene.
Oh, yeah.
Finances was not really brought up very much. The pornography thing, I think, was interesting because they didn't have kids. Our history is that we also had pornography in our marriage with me, and we resolved that and kind of have moved past it. But one of the biggest things was, like, my wife was pregnant when she first found out, and that sparked a desire to actually start working towards getting out of that habit and moving forward. But they don't have kids. I'm pretty sure that Alina would have slid out, like left the marriage if we weren't, having kids on the way or having a child on the way at that time. Is
Yeah.
that true?
Oh yeah. That's definitely true. I think it was definitely a God thing. Like God knew what He was doing.
There's a story that I read in a book called For Men Only. It talks about the little girl who wants to be a ballerina princess. Picture this having a daughter, 5 years old, and she's cute and she's wearing a tutu and she wants to be a princess and she's dancing and she's excited to one day marry a prince. And she wants to marry you because you're just the perfect man because you're her daddy, but she can't. She's gonna one day marry someone else, and she finds this person, and this person loves her for who she is, and they get married, and then she realizes that she's not that person's world. She realizes that person also finds other women attractive. That little cute little girl who grew up, who had all the hope in the world, and didn't ask to be treated like that, or to be diminished, or to be lacking in love for the man who she actually fell in love with and loves with all her heart. He's looking at other women and finding them attractive as well, and giving them time and stuff. And that just shatters a female, that shatters a woman and her perspective on that man. And all relationships, it just changes after that. And it's our job as men, especially men who plan on getting married, to make sure that we try as hard as we can to not get a woman to that point of being shattered, to try to hold some kind of form of honor and dignity and all that stuff about ourselves, to keep her as much as that little girl who has all the dreams in the world as possible. Because once that shatter happens, it is very hard to get out of it. It's hard to get back. It's hard to get to a place where that little girl looks at you and is happy to be with you again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an everyman battle thing, but and it's a shameful thing that happens, and it's something that I believe is one of the main causes of marital hate. It's a spark that happens in the female from the man's actions, I believe. If a man, went into the marriage full force, ready for it, already had, pornography knocked out of the way, and everything was good as far as that's concerned, I think that marriages would start off at a better foot. There will be less quote unquote nagging and all this other stuff.
She wasn't the only culprit or the only wrongdoer in the marriage. I mean, she was having an emotional affair. Now, granted, I guess it could be argued that she wasn't getting what she needed and he wasn't getting what he needed, so they were seeking those needs outside of the marriage. So I think that's something to be looked at, is meeting each other's needs in the marriage. So that, not saying anyone's to blame, but thought it was good too that they brought up an emotional affair, because she wasn't necessarily, she wasn't to the point of full-blown adultery, but she was on that road to it. I think it brings up a couple points. Women in the workplace, and just how easy it is for women to develop these deep relationships with men if they are not careful, because they're spending an extended period of time with them every day, most of the week, and probably more time with other men that are not their husband than their husband themselves. So that's thing one. And then thing two, I think, is the danger of sharing too much about your marriage with people who are not in your marriage. I guess they're, obviously, that's just you and your husband then, or you and your wife. I mean, you have to be very careful of the details you share, because it can be preyed upon for somebody who wants to have an extramarital affair, or it could be like kind of instigated, like, or used as, people who wants to instigate and make you do things that, God does not want you to do. Her little friends, kept her going, and it seemed like they encouraged her not to. They planted ideas in her head that weren't true. That, and they just kind of stirred the pot constantly, and it just was not healthy. And that's something I did not know, I guess, is, I guess I've heard, you don't share all your business to everybody, but I guess now I see why you don't.
I found it interesting with the doctor because throughout the movie we see that doctor and he's spitting game and just spending time with the lady, the wife and stuff, and he apparently spent some money on the wife's mother and to get a hospital bed or a wheelchair or something like that. He spends a little bit of money, or we assume he spends a lot of money on her. But, he does all that stuff. But what's interesting is that he had a wedding ring. Like, there's a part of the movie where Kirk Cameron's character goes to the hospital because he saved someone from a fire, saved a little girl from a fire. And the doctor was like, don't put on that wedding ring while your hand heals. And he was like, oh, well, my hand better just heal on with it, And then in another scene, he's like, thank you for, healing my hand. Feels real good right now. And he's like, I know you're spitting game to my wife, and I'm still married to her, so I got a leg up. And you see that doctor, like, pull a ring out of, I guess, his pocket or a drawer or something like that, and he tries to put it on, and then he takes it back off again. And he starts blowing off the wife. He starts to not go to lunch with her anymore. I found that part interesting because it felt like either he was getting convicted on it, not that he was just getting scared of Kirk Cameron. I mean, he could have. Honestly, it's Kirk Cameron, little girl, but thanks for my, like little light voice and stuff. But I don't know. Like, it seemed like he was getting convicted, and he probably wanted to start the process of reconciling with his own wife, or trying to keep his own marriage up.
I think it was good too that from a wife standpoint, the importance of having your husband as your protector and as your covering, that he's looking out for you like a sheep with a shepherd, I guess, in Jesus in a way, and being the bride of Christ, that he's seeing things that we don't see, and he's stepping in when necessary. Like, if you can't handle this yourself, then I'm gonna step in. I think it's also good for husbands to see that some things can be stopped, that you can put some boundaries in place so that you aren't having these kinds of issues. And his boundaries, like, look, I'm not going to go to lunch with her anymore. I'm not going to keep fueling the fire of this budding relationship. Like, he knew what to do. He knew that, okay, I'm not talking to her, I'm not going to lunch, and he just needed somebody to kick him in the pants to be like, you need to stop.
I believe that another reason why married couples hate each other is because sometimes they have a thankless job. They get offended. They're more selfish. Or the best sides of him is when he's a firefighter, when he's saving lives, when he's risking his life for people. You made comments during the movie like, who wouldn't want to be married to a hero? Like, this guy's a hero, and I had to keep reminding her, like, hey, pornography. Hey, this guy's into, looking at quote unquote trash on the internet is what it brought Lena back to reality. But he does do some heroic stuff. He's leading his team properly and stuff, and joking around with them, and it seems more like his work life does seem more like a family than his home life did at that time.
I think that's the point, that they wanted to create someone who was, doing well at work, but at home it was falling apart, and he was almost going to completely destroy it.
Sometimes when in a marriage, it just feels like life would be better if you just left. Like, life would be better, the person would be happier, your spouse would be happier if she left, and you'd be happier if you left. And it's just, like, why are we here? It gets to a point in, I believe, any relationship outside of marriage as well as inside of marriage, where you have to ask yourself the question, why are you here? Why are you staying? What are you fighting for? What is your goal? What is your personal goal in this relationship?
Right. Yeah. I agree, because love is not enough. Like, love is a feeling, and you that's not going to carry a marriage. I think that was portrayed really well in that film, is that you have to decide, and that is going to take work. It is not something that happens to you. It is something that you are working. That it's not just on autopilot. And I think what was good is that because the wife at that point, she was the one who brought up the divorce first, from what it seemed, and who knows if they talked about it previously. But then the husband was willing to go along with it until he, talked to his parents more about it, and he kind of got some guidance to kind of keep holding on. And I think that's like a good point of the film too, is like with any marriage, I think any marriage is going to need some help, like someone to help you navigate some things, to kind of break down some of those stereotypes, because I think a lot of times, we go into marriage, Christian or not, which is interesting because you brought up that they may not have been Christian, or they weren't Christian, when they got married. You go into marriage thinking that I can get out, or, if this doesn't work out, I don't have to stay in this, and
that's how our society is.
Right.
Marriage is just another, level of dating. Marriage is just a gift that you give somebody for a moment, and you can just take it away whenever you want to. It's just a Valentine's Day thing. Something to make someone's heart fluttery for a little while, a little prom, adult prom, and then that's it.
Yeah.
So the movie has 3 parts. The first part is very short, and it's just the relationship between the man and the woman, and kind of what's going on at her job with this doctor, and kind of what's going on at his job with literally just saving lives and having fun with the guys. He just had fun with the guys the whole movie. And then part 2 is what I believe is the beginning parts of the love dare, from day 1 to day 20. And being a little funny at first, right? He's making her coffee, and she just, shrugs it off. He's throwing it away. He's leaving her flowers, and she's like, just blowing it off and throwing it away. So it's funny, but then it gets to the point where it's like, I'm even asking myself, why is he doing this? Why is he continuing on?
I mean, I think he had just, I guess, a typical male desire to conquer and to see it through to the end, and he just wanted to complete it. And it didn't matter to him if he wasn't doing it well. It was just like, hey, it's done. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, his heart, wasn't in it. And he admitted it later on that his heart wasn't in it. But that was the most difficult part to see that it didn't seem like it was making a difference.
I believe that this part is really, the second part of the movie, it really shows why married couples hate each other. Because that's what we do, is that those first 20 days of the love dare. Sometimes we do it on purpose, sometimes we don't do it on purpose. I've given you plenty of gifts without thinking about it too much. Oh, it's Valentine's Day, I gotta, stop by a store real quick. It's late, and I'm giving you a Valentine's gift, kind of just, 5 minutes ago, just bought from the store or something. It really goes with, hey, I'm doing this and I'm not being thanked for it, or they don't really care about it, or it's just something that gets swept under the rug type of deal. And you're waiting for someone to acknowledge, and they don't ever acknowledge, or they don't acknowledge unless you bring it up. And when you do bring it up, they don't acknowledge it legitimately, And that can fuel some hatred towards another spouse, and a husband and a wife.
Yeah, that, and I just think just the root of selfishness. If it's convenient for me, I'll do it. If not, I'm not going to do it. Like you said, unmet expectations. I'm expecting things to be a certain way, and if they're not, then I take it personal, and you don't change. So then, I'm more upset, and then it's like, you get to the point where you're resentful. I don't think hate in marriage doesn't happen that quickly. I think it's a slow fade, as they talk about, that it is something that just builds and builds and builds until it gets to that way left field extreme of hate. And I think that's the lesson in it too for married couples, is that you gotta get those weeds. Like, you can't let things just grow and take over like the garden, so to speak. You have to keep it well maintained.
When we get into the third part of the movie, it's like he's ready to really give up this love dare thing. He just made this really nice dinner and all this kind of stuff, and she's like, "I don't love you anymore," and that was tough to hear. We've had moments in our marriage where we would argue and stuff, and things were just said that were harsh. It's so easy to get to a point where you're just angry and get to a point where you would want to leave, especially if someone told me I don't, that they don't love me anymore, and I was just a teenager dating them. The easy solution is to get out of the relationship. Then, if you don't love me anymore, then I don't need you. Then I can move on very easily. But when you hear something like that in a marriage, it's not like that means immediately divorce. It doesn't mean that. It means period. Maybe move on and struggle through it. Still make up do things for them and try to reconcile the marriage. You don't just take it and leave it.
Yeah, I mean, marriage is a commitment, and something that you said you're going to do. So if you said you're going to do it, doesn't matter if it's hard or difficult. He was basically carrying it on his own as far as trying to save the marriage. He was the only one trying to save it. I mean, at one point, it got to the point literal divorce was right there. Like it had already kind of been done.
Yeah, the papers are right there.
Yeah.
That was the time when he actually finally got rid of that computer. When he got rid of that computer, he took the bat towards it. The neighbor was watching him. And the wife comes home and she sees the computer in the trash can outside and comes where the computer was and was like really nice flowers and a little note that says, "I love you more." And then he comes home and sees a note from her and it's the divorce papers.
Yeah, it was really sad because he was all hopeful. I think he was looking like, yeah, this finally working and this is going to be some good news, but it's like the worst news ever. That was the most touching part to me, to see that him say, "I love you more." However, if I had to give a criticism, not really criticism, but another point of unrealisticness for me, aside from the kids and the finance thing, is, pornography is an addiction, and it just seemed like he got rid of it just like that. Like there was they showed some struggle. They showed some of the war that I guess goes on internally. Do I look at it? Do I not? Like you can see him kind of struggle with it, but just from personal experience, just from us, and then, I guess some other people, have heard and read that pornography is not that easy to, depending on, I guess
back in the day they just had flip phones. I mean, maybe all he needed was to destroy the computer and he's good.
Yeah,
but that isn't realistic. He would need a group, typically a male group, somebody there with him, coaching him through it. But they only showed him struggle when the computer was there, and it didn't seem like he had the struggle where he had an internal thing. It just seemed like his computer was set up where there was little pop-ups that pop up like those old AOL, internet computers. Just the pop-ups would come up that way, and that would be his struggle. It seemed like, and he would just sit there and fight it.
Yeah, but I appreciate the film showing that, because that is a marriage killer. Like even now, 2022, that's still harming marriage. And it's not just the pornography, it's the root of it, which is, lust, and just sexual sin, I guess, in general. But I think it's good because it's not talked about, and I don't think it's talked about enough, like before marriage either. Like it's like something you don't find out until you're in it.
I also found it so interesting, or a good picture of Christ as well, of the Moses when he's doing the miracles of God and all that other stuff. But when the wife finds out, who really paid for that hospital bed or paid the most on the hospital bed, for the mom. Like she was like the doctor or the lady who was at the hospital bed place. I don't know. Like she was like the doctor paid like $300 and the husband paid $22,000 or $24,000.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever he was saving up for some boat. He was saving up for the boat this whole movie. Along with the pornography, he was just looking at boats on the computer, and then someone would pop up,
Yeah.
So when he hit that computer and all that stuff, apparently it was also to, I think, to get rid of that looking at boats. Because with the "I love you more," when she counted back those, I think said the payment was made 20 days ago or something like that. It was around that same time when he destroyed that computer, when he wrote "I love you more," and he's like, "Oh, thanks, I got a leg up on you because I'm married to her." Like, he already paid for that the hospital bed and stuff then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I love you more part. The divorce papers are already signed. All that stuff. He already paid for the bed. And that was interesting to see. Satan will give you $300. God does above and beyond.
Yeah, I think it's good that he, practiced selflessness in that way. I think that was the most touching, to see that he did something for her that she didn't have to tell him to do. Like, he knew, he already studied her, which was talked about in the film too. He knew what was on her heart, what she was thinking about, what she was worried about, and he met that need for her, in a way that was, specific to her.
The lady shared that with the doctor. The doctor already knew that stuff forward, but it seemed like her husband didn't have all that information. Like, they weren't in a place where they were communicating properly anyway. So he actually had to study and discover that that was going on, where the mom needed the hospital bed and the wheelchair and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I found it interesting that he had to take time out and kind of research his wife, learn her. I think that was one of the days too, like day 6 or something. Love there. What are your takeaways as your first time seeing that movie?
So the selflessness, that's important for both sides, husband and wife, and just not giving up, and that it takes work, it takes effort.
I think the biggest resolution for couples who hate each other, married couples who hate each other, and it might sound like easily write it off as just, you got to learn how to love God, and you have to learn how to also look at yourself as God looks at you. Like, that was the biggest thing that helped me get out of my pornography addiction. I can't just love you without getting rid of the stuff that is going to be in between you and me in our marriage. I couldn't love you right without looking at myself and respecting myself enough to get rid of some stuff. But also, looking at myself how God looks at me, that I'm worth dying for, even though I'm stupid, even though I make bad choices, even if I, treated him poorly. I believe that's the biggest thing, is to love God and look at yourself like God looks at you. Give yourself the respect that, that someone actually died for your sins. And then you can love your wife, or then you can love your spouse. Then you can start resolving things, in my opinion. And I think that picture in the movie is the best picture on how you resolve a relationship.
The Bible speaks about you overcome evil with good. And that's, I believe, what he did. Like, he just kept pouring it on, like, good.
And he was getting divorce papers, and he was getting I hate yous and stuff, and he was just taking it.
Yeah. Because I think that when someone is hurt so much, there's going to be some level of proving that the person has to do. Like, okay, you say this, but I'm so hurt, I don't even know if I can believe you. I need to see. So it's not so much that she was making him work for it, or that she was playing hard to get, or she was teasing him.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there were some points where she was not completely honest. It kind of showed, when she was sick, and she was like, no, I don't want anything. And then he left, and then the camera kind of shows her like, looking at the door like, oh, did he really leave? I'm like, no, I really went somewhere. Like, so I know that for women, we kind of play that little game. But for some people, I don't think it's necessarily this game. Like I said, I think they're just so hurt. And it's like, well, I don't want to be hurt again. So I'm just going to lie, essentially, and say, I don't need you. But you really do.
And he came back with the Chick-fil-A.
Oh,
he came back with that Chick-fil-A soup.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, first of all, he already, like, let me see. I don't know if he felt her head before he left that first time.
No, because when she was like, no, I don't need anything, he just left.
So he automatically, or not automatically, but he assumed that she was sick. Like, no, because no one goes to Chick-fil-A get a soup unless there's a reason. You go get that sandwich. But he assumed that she was sick. Then he came back with the soup and felt her head. Oh, you have a fever. Good thing you got this soup.
It's important to realize that once trust is broken, it's not an easy fix, and that it's going to take some time, and you are going to have to repeatedly, do some things to kind of prove that, hey, this is the real me. And it's only, I just think it's a defense mechanism for some people. It's like, I don't want to trust you because I've been hurt so much, so I'm not going to, it's like the boy who cried wolf. You say wolf, wolf, wolf so much, and then when you really mean it, it doesn't have any power to it because you've abused it so much.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's why marriages fail. That's why couples hate each other. Because there is no, in not just regular marriages or non-Christian marriages, but just Christian marriages as well. Like, there is that level of me, or selfishness. You think, just because you do whatever, you give a flower, you buy a little meal once, you clean up a floor, you throw your own underwear in the washing machine or something, that you're going to be back in someone's good graces and stuff, and it takes time and effort and pain. It's going to be repeated over and over, and you don't know how long it's going to take. It can take years, it can take decades, it can take just a few months, who knows. And that stuff, you have to really decide if you want to be in this relationship or not, if you want to reconcile or not, if you want to work on building trust, because it doesn't mean you keep trying to make someone happy forever and you slip up. Like, that's what hurt our trust even more in our own relationship. It's like you gotta be willing to keep going. And honestly, without a Christian background, it's very hard to have a non-selfish approach if you don't have some example of Christ or something like that fueling it. What relationship stays after trust is broken unless you have a picture of Christ going on along with that? It's so difficult. I don't know what relationship without Jesus can actually survive that, because relationships with Jesus can barely survive that.
Yeah, consistency is important. I mean, just have to keep at it.
But all right, see y'all later.